What happened when an undercover CEO walked into his own airport lounge and caught his staff sabotaging a single mom just trying to survive. Welcome back, wise minds and loyal hearts. You always show up for the stories that matter. In today's gripping episode, a luxury lounge becomes the stage for betrayal, dignity, and redemption. You're about to witness how one woman's quiet strength and one CEO's hidden mission changed everything. Buckle up, because this isn't just about coffee orders and first-class service. It's about exposing cruelty, restoring justice, and proving that character still counts. Let's dive into the story. The hum of espresso machines and soft jazz filled the sleek interior of the Altura Sky Lounge, where glass walls overlooked the runway and luxury met routine for first-class travelers. But today, serenity shattered. Sophie Kim stood frozen, a tray trembling in her hands, as a well-dressed passenger rose from his leather seat and berated her, loud enough for the entire lounge to hear. "I asked for no almond milk!" "Are you trying to kill me?" he shouted, shoving the untouched latte aside. Gasps rippled across the room as guests turned their heads. Sophie's face paled. She had double-checked the order twice. Before she could respond, Bradley Shore, the lounge manager, swooped in with exaggerated concern. "Mr. Callahan, I'm terribly sorry. This is unacceptable. Sophie, outside, now." He didn't wait for her response, just pointed toward the service door like a school principal sending a child to detention. As she stepped away, cheeks burning, she caught the sideways glances of co-workers. Rena smirked by the wine bar. Cody, the lounge handyman, leaned against a pillar with arms crossed, watching her walk away like a man admiring a plan well executed. Behind the marble coffee counter, a quiet figure named Dylan Mercer wiped down glasses. New hire, low profile. Supposedly just transferred from another airport. No one knew he was actually the CEO of Altura Air, owner of the very lounge in which this humiliation played out. For weeks, he'd heard about slipping standards, anonymous staff complaints, and VIP dissatisfaction. But numbers didn't tell stories, so he shaved his beard, swapped a suit for staff whites, and became invisible. What he just witnessed wasn't incompetence, it was something deeper. Sophie's service record had been spotless. The mistake didn't make sense. Yet Bradley hadn't asked, hadn't checked, just punished her publicly. Dylan noted the power dynamics instantly, the tension, the silence from others, the smug expressions of those standing by. It was off, and while Sophie slipped out the service door with her dignity barely intact, Dylan quietly resolved, "I need to know who's really running this place. And who? Running it into the ground." Sophie Kim had once been the heart of the Altura Sky Lounge. Guests remembered her by name, her warm smile, and how she always seemed to know whether they preferred sparkling water or still before they even asked. But in the past 3 weeks, that glow had begun to dim. Orders she swore she entered correctly were mysteriously wrong. Drinks came out missing ingredients, VIPs complained about poor service, and Bradley Shore, once superficially friendly, became sharply critical. Always in public, always with the same rehearsed line, "This isn't the level of service we promised." To outsiders, Sophie might have looked like she was slipping. To those who worked beside her, she seemed cursed by bad luck. Only Sophie knew something wasn't right. She triple-checked every task now. She logged her orders, took photos of VIP drink tags, and still, something always went wrong. It was like someone wanted her to break. Sophie's shifts stretched from early morning pre-boarding rush to late-night last calls, and when she wasn't serving fussy executives or wiping down polished chrome counters, she was in night classes at the local college, inching toward her hospitality management degree. All for one goal, to build a better life for her 5-year-old daughter, Mia. Her world ran on tips, coupons, daycare drop-offs, and late-night studying. Her strength came from somewhere deeper than exhaustion. But even steel bends under enough pressure. Sophie had begun to lose sleep, wake up anxious, and wonder, what if it really is me? Watching from behind the scenes, Dylan Mercer noticed it all. Her precision, her effort, the way she encouraged the shy new trainee, Mila Torres, or stayed late to help reset the wine display, even when she wasn't scheduled. But he also saw the way Cody, the manager's cocky nephew, lingered around the POS terminal when Sophie wasn't looking. How Rena, the other lounge hostess, was always nearby when something just happened to go wrong. It wasn't chaos. It was coordinated. Sophie wasn't failing. She was being targeted. One evening, after yet another tongue-lashing from Bradley over a misplaced snack order, Sophie quietly cried in the staff locker room. Mila, unsure of what to say, sat beside her in silence. Dylan, watching through the reflection in a nearby mirrored panel, felt a knot in his chest. It was time to act. He didn't just see a loyal employee under siege. He saw a system designed to break the very people keeping it alive, and a woman doing everything right being crushed for it. Dylan Mercer had been in the corporate world long enough to know that toxic cultures don't erupt overnight. They're built quietly, brick by brick, behind closed doors and under weak leadership. And at the Altura Sky Lounge, those bricks were people. As he deepened his observation, patterns began to form. Bradley Shore, the polished lounge manager with a smooth voice and a fake grin, had once been praised for keeping the elite customers happy. But behind the scenes, he ran the lounge like a high school clique, rewarding loyalty, punishing dissent, and looking the other way when rules were bent by his inner circle. Cody Shore, his smug 20-something nephew who held a maintenance role, had no business near the service floor, yet Dylan noticed him hovering around the ticket printer far too often, conveniently near whenever Sophie's orders went missing or wrong. Even more telling, whenever things went wrong, Cody was already smirking before anyone complained. Rena Vasquez, the sharply dressed hostess with eyes always scanning the room, completed the triangle. She was often seen whispering to Bradley during slow shifts or disappearing into the storage room for suspiciously long inventory checks. Dylan began quietly reviewing staff schedules and noticed something else. Sophie's best shifts, high tipping time slots, had been reassigned to Rena over the past month with no documented reason. At first glance, it looked like a coincidence. But Dylan knew better. He started cross-checking digital logs from the point-of-sale system with printed tickets, and that's when the manipulation became clear. Ordered tickets Sophie submitted were often overwritten by someone using her login. The timestamps. To confirm his suspicions, Dylan pulled aside Mila Torres, the shy teenage trainee who seemed to idolize Sophie. Alone in the break room, he asked, carefully, "Have you ever noticed anything strange about the tickets or who's near the printer?" Mila's eyes widened, and after a nervous pause, she nodded. "Cody. He's always near it. I saw him switch one once, but I didn't say anything. He scares me." Her voice cracked with guilt. "I think they're trying to get Sophie fired." The final piece fell into place. Sophie hadn't just been unlucky. She was caught in a quiet campaign of sabotage, led by a manager protecting his nephew and a hostess hungry for power. Dylan's jaw tightened. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was personal, malicious, and calculated, and it was time for the boardroom executive in disguise to fight back, with evidence, strategy, and consequences. The day Sophie hit rock bottom began with promise. She arrived early, makeup lightly done, her posture straight, determination painted across her face like armor. After weeks of sabotage and whispered blame, she was desperate to prove she could still perform at the level her regulars remembered. When Bradley informed her that a visiting food critic from Sky Travel Quarterly would be seated in her section, Sophie took it as a chance to redeem her. What she didn't know was that the critic wasn't real. He was actually Dylan's college friend Miles, playing a part in the CEO's unfolding plan to expose the truth. Sophie greeted Miles with professional charm, took his elaborate custom drink and snack order with painstaking care, and entered every modification into the system with surgical precision. But moments after submitting the order, Cody struck again. While pretending to mop near the station, he casually palmed Sophie's printed ticket and replaced it with one from his pocket, bearing her name, but altered just enough to guarantee disaster. The coffee came out wrong, the snack was missing the gluten-free note, and within minutes, The critic was shaking his head in feigned disappointment. Bradley pounced on the scene like a shark smelling blood. "That's it," he snapped, in front of the entire lounge. "You've embarrassed this company enough. You're suspended until further notice." The words cut deep, not just because they were unfair, but because they were spoken publicly, once again stripping Sophie of dignity before a crowd she worked so hard to impress. Sophie stood there, stunned, eyes blinking back tears, unsure whether to defend herself or just disappear. No one intervened. Rena pretended to look concerned while hiding a smirk. Cody leaned in the doorway, arms crossed like a king overseeing a conquered enemy. Sophie's fingers trembled as she untied her apron, placing it on the counter with slow, deliberate movements. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice cracking, though she had nothing to be sorry for. She walked out of the lounge, passing polished marble and first-class passengers who barely looked up. Mila tried to follow, but Sophie raised a hand. "Don't." Outside, in the employee corridor, she finally let the tears fall, her shoulders heaving in silence. She wasn't just exhausted, she was unraveling, and yet behind the tinted window of the break room door, Dylan watched. He clenched his jaw, his decision solidified. This wasn't just about uncovering bad management anymore. It was about protecting someone who still had the courage to care when no one else did. Dylan Mercer had built companies, rescued failing divisions, and negotiated billion-dollar deals. But nothing felt as personal as what he was about to do. Sophie Kim wasn't just a wronged employee. She was the kind of person a company should be built around. So when she walked out that lounge door with her head bowed and spirit fractured, Dylan decided it was time to end the charade. That night he met with Miles, his longtime friend and now co-conspirator, to set the final trap. Miles, a successful travel blogger with enough online clout to make people nervous, would return tomorrow under the guise of a Sky Travel Quarterly critic. The setup would be perfect, an over-the-top drink and food request with layers of customizations, enough to give Cody and Bradley the temptation to tamper one last time. At sunrise the next morning, Dylan installed a discreet button camera inside a nearby potted plant with a direct line of sight to the service station ticket wheel. Mila, now fully looped in, agreed to keep watch and alert Dylan the moment Cody made a move. Sophie, unaware of the plan, returned to the lounge earlier than expected. Her eyes were puffy, but her voice was steady. "I need to work. I need this job," she told Bradley, who sneered and gave her the worst section and busiest tasks. Again. Dylan watched as she powered through with quiet resolve, treating each guest with care and precision, her professionalism intact, despite the bruises no one could see. When Miles arrived, designer blazer, DSLR camera slung over his shoulder, Bradley practically tripped over himself trying to make a good impression. "Mr. Jenner from Sky Travel, welcome," he announced to the team, loud enough for every staff member to hear. "We're honored to host you." Then, with an arrogant smirk, he turned to Sophie. "Try not to embarrass us this time. He's yours." Sophie flinched, but nodded. She took Miles's intentionally complicated order, repeating every detail back. Extra dry cappuccino with oat milk, vegan chocolate biscotti warmed exactly 12 seconds, a fruit cup with no pineapple and extra mango. Then she entered it into the POS system and printed the ticket, double-checking every item. Mila's signal came quickly, a subtle tug on her earring as Cody walked by the service wheel. Dylan moved into position, watching as Cody reached for the ticket, already holding a replacement in his palm. But before he could make the swap, Dylan dropped a metal spoon onto a tray with a loud clang, startling both Cody and nearby staff. The sleight of hand halted mid-motion. Cody looked up, eyes darting to Dylan, who stared right back, calm, steady, and knowing. Cody retreated without completing the switch, but it was too late. The camera had recorded everything. Dylan now had what he needed: intent, action, and motive. Cody hadn't just sabotaged a coworker. He'd exposed a culture of corruption. Now it was time to end the game, reveal the truth, and rewrite the rules. The Sky Lounge felt unusually full as the fake food critic Miles finished his elaborate order with exaggerated delight, snapping photos and jotting notes in a leather-bound journal. Bradley hovered nearby like a proud peacock, soaking in what he believed would be a glowing review under his management. Sophie stood quietly to the side, not knowing her meticulous effort had not only passed the test, but would soon become the turning point of her life. Then, with deliberate calm, Dylan stepped forward. "Excuse me, everyone," he said, his voice steady but loud enough to carry across the polished floor. Heads turned. Bradley looked confused. "Who are you speaking to, Mercer?" he snapped, using the fake last name Dylan had been going by. "Return to your station." But Dylan didn't move. Instead, he held up his phone, tapped the screen, and cast the video feed to the large wall monitor used for lounge announcements. Gasps echoed as the footage played. Cody, reaching toward the service wheel with a fake ticket in hand, pausing, retreating. Then, rewinding and zooming in, a message on his phone became visible. "Make sure she messes up big. I want her gone today." The sender? Bradley Shore. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Rena stepped backward, pale. Cody's jaw dropped. Bradley's expression went from irritation to alarm in seconds. "What is this? This is illegal surveillance," Bradley barked, his voice rising, eyes searching for allies and finding none. "You're nobody, just a trainee." Dylan stepped forward, took off his barista apron, and removed his fake glasses. "Actually, my name is Dylan Mercer. I'm the CEO of Altura Air." The room froze. Even Sophie, standing beside the coffee bar, dropped her towel. Rena covered her mouth. Mila stared, wide-eyed. Bradley opened and closed his mouth, speechless. "I came here undercover after weeks of reports about falling service quality, low morale, and unusual staff turnover," Dylan continued, his voice calm but resolute. "What I found was worse than I imagined. I found a manager abusing his power, a campaign of sabotage against one of our most dedicated employees, and a culture built on fear and favoritism." He turned to Sophie. "You were never the problem. You were the target." Sophie's lips parted, but no words came. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from shock. Dylan turned back to the staff and guests. "Cody Shore, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you off the premises." 2 guards appeared at the lounge entrance. "Bradley Shore, you're on administrative leave pending a full investigation. I suspect we'll find more than just text messages." Bradley blustered in protest, but no one listened. He was already irrelevant. Dylan nodded to the staff. "This lounge deserves better, you deserve better," and as Bradley and Cody were removed, the Sky Lounge took its first real breath in weeks. One filled with justice, relief, and the hope of something new. With Bradley and Cody escorted out, the Sky Lounge staff stood in stunned silence, the reality of what just happened slowly settling in. No one returned to their stations right away. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the silence wasn't born from fear, but from stunned relief. Dylan stepped forward once more, addressing the entire team. "I want to start by apologizing," he said sincerely. "I should have seen this sooner. The fact that someone like Sophie was made to feel disposable reflects a failure of leadership, mine included." His words were quiet, but they hit hard. Sophie stood near the espresso bar, arms crossed over her apron, still trying to process everything. Rena avoided her gaze, suddenly looking much smaller in her corner. Mila beamed with pride but kept it hidden behind a hand pressed gently over her chest. Dylan continued. "This lounge wasn't broken because of numbers or market forces. It was broken because decent people were silenced and bad ones were protected. That ends today." He looked toward Rena next. "You enabled this behavior. I won't fire you. Yet. But your schedule and duties will be adjusted, and you'll be placed under direct mentorship and evaluation. If you can prove you're here for the right reasons, you'll have a future with us." Rena nodded quickly, visibly shaken, her confident demeanor cracked. Then Dylan turned to Sophie, his voice softening. "And you deserve far more than an apology." Sophie blinked, her eyes already moist. "You showed resilience, integrity, and grace under pressure. You protected this lounge better than anyone. I'm sorry you were made to feel like the problem." You were the solution all along." A few claps broke out from the back, first from Mila, then from a few attendants. Sophie managed a small, stunned smile. Dylan let the applause fade. "We're rebuilding this lounge, not just its image but its soul. That starts with people like Sophie." The moment marked not just the end of a toxic era, but the beginning of a new culture. One based on respect, transparency, and leadership that protected, not preyed on, its best people. For the first time in a long time, the staff didn't feel like employees standing in a hierarchy. They felt like a team. The following morning, the Sky Lounge remained closed to the public until noon, a first in its history. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow over the spotless bar counters and velvet chairs. Staff members, seated in a semicircle of leather armchairs, looked not like employees waiting for orders, but like a team about to hear real news. At the center stood Dylan Mercer, this time in a tailored navy suit, no apron or disguise, just the CEO, but one who had earned their attention in the most unexpected way. "Today, we begin again," he said, his tone calm but resolute. Not with press releases or promotions, but with people. He began with policy changes, new anonymous reporting channels, fair scheduling protocols, and a rotating mentorship program that would give every staff member the opportunity to grow into leadership roles. Then came the moment no one expected. This lounge needs a leader who knows what it takes to carry it. Someone who's lived the long shifts, the impatient guests, the quiet nights, and the small victories. Someone who never folded, even when others tried to break her. He turned to Sophie. "Sophie Kim, I'd like to offer you the role of lounge operations supervisor, effective immediately." Gasps echoed around the room. Sophie's eyes widened. "Me?" she said, almost inaudibly. "But I'm just—" Dylan raised a hand, smiling. "You're not just anything. You're the person this lounge needs. You've proven yourself more than any resume ever could, and you're 2 semesters away from finishing your degree, which we'll be covering in full. Starting today, Altura Air is establishing a scholarship fund for single parents in hospitality. You'll be our first recipient." Sophie's lips trembled. She tried to speak, but the words got stuck behind the lump in her throat. It was Mila's voice that broke the silence, cheerful and unfiltered. "Say yes." The room burst into light laughter and spontaneous applause. Sophie looked around at her teammates, some smiling, some tearing up, all nodding with quiet encouragement. She slowly stood, still in her barista uniform, and extended her hand to Dylan. "Yes," she whispered, then added louder, steadier, "Yes, I accept." That moment wasn't just a promotion, it was the reclamation of dignity, a shift in culture, a promise that doing the right thing, no matter how quiet, small, or difficult, was still the surest way to rise. And for the first time in weeks, Sophie stood tall, not as the woman trying to survive, but as the one leading the way forward. 1 month later, the Sky Lounge was nearly unrecognizable, not in appearance, but in energy. The chrome gleamed a little brighter, the team moved with quiet synergy, and laughter, once rare, had returned like an old friend. Dylan Mercer stepped through the main entrance for the first time not as a spy, not as a CEO on a mission, but as a passenger awaiting a flight. He wore no suit this time, just a travel jacket and a relaxed smile. No one rushed to greet him, no one flattered him, and that was exactly how he wanted it. The lounge was running smoothly, not because he was present, but because the right people were finally in the right positions. Sophie Kim spotted him near the window bar and walked over, clipboard in hand. She was no longer in an apron, but a sharp Altura supervisor blazer, fitted and crisp. Her name badge now read, "Sophie Kim, Operations Supervisor." "Mr. Mercer," she said with a warm, knowing grin, "your cappuccino's better than ever, if I may say so." Dylan chuckled. "No almond milk, I promise." She rolled her eyes playfully. "We triple-checked those now." They sat for a few minutes, watching planes taxi in the distance. "How are things?" he asked. Sophie leaned back slightly. "Customer satisfaction is up 40%, employee turnover is near 0, and I have weekends off now. Mia's loving her time at the new on-site daycare you helped fund. Dylan nodded, visibly pleased. And your classes, she smiled, straight A's. One semester left. She hesitated, then added with a faint blush, I even went on a date last week. It was weird, but nice. Dylan raised a brow teasingly. Well, I expect a full report next month. Sophie laughed, a real laugh, light and free. As she stood to return to her duties, Dylan watched her walk away, poised and purposeful. He looked around at the lounge, humming with quiet excellence, and thought about how close this place had come to losing everything good within it. Not because of competition or profit margins, but because of people who'd been allowed to abuse power unchecked. And yet, because one person stood tall through it all, and another chose to listen and act, it had all been turned around. This was more than redemption. This was proof. Sometimes the biggest wins come quietly, on the other side of a broken system, rebuilt by dignity, courage, and a second chance. The story of Sophie Kim and the Sky Lounge reveals a powerful truth. The integrity of a workplace isn't measured by its luxury or reputation, it's measured by how it treats its people. Sophie, a hardworking single mother, was nearly driven out by a toxic trio that abused power, manipulated systems, and preyed on silence. But her quiet resilience, combined with one leader's willingness to look deeper, turned everything around. The greatest lesson here is that real leadership means showing up when it's uncomfortable, listening when others stay silent, and taking action when justice demands it. Dylan Mercer could have reviewed reports from afar, but instead he stepped into the mess himself. By doing so, he didn't just expose corruption, he restored dignity, empowered overlooked employees, and built a culture rooted in fairness. For anyone in a position of authority, the takeaway is clear. Invest in people, not just profit. And for those struggling in silence, Sophie's journey reminds us that even when you're being undermined, your worth isn't defined by someone else's cruelty. It's defined by how you keep showing up with integrity, purpose, and hope. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is keep going until someone finally sees you.